Come along, people, listen to me. Don't try to find a home down in Canberra, ACT. It's a bourgeois town. I say it's a bourgeois town. Got the bourgeois blues going straight, the news all around you.
Mid-Century with a Twist is a podcast sponsored by Canberra Museum and Gallery under the Cultural Facilities Corporation for the ACT Government. I'm Hannah Paddon.
And I'm Vanessa Roth. Welcome to Mid-Century with a Twist.
This is our first foray into the podcasting world. We're producing this episode for the Heritage Festival, whose theme this year is Canberra in the Mid-Century. Vanessa, we've got some stories for our listeners, haven't we?
Yes, we're talking about the music, the food, and the flies. First off, though, what is the mid-century, Hannah, and why was this an important time in Canberra?
Mid-century generally covers the period from the end of World War II in the late 1940s until around the 1970s. It's really seen as an era of innovation, optimism and progress that transformed Canberra from a sparsely populated bush capital to a busier, more modern metropolis. The mid-century period is a really important few decades in the life of the ACT.
So why are we at Lanyon today? We're not actually talking mid-19th century Canberra, Hannah.
That's a great question, Vanessa. No, we're definitely not talking mid-19th century. Before Canberra became the capital in 1913, it was ostensibly a rural community where people were outnumbered quite substantially by sheep and cattle. So there was a massive problem with flies as a result.
Yes, some people actually called Canberra a waste of a good sheep paddock.
The recently departed Canberra icon, Doug Waterhouse, reminisced about her family's early days in the new bush capital. These are her words, but not her voice.
My father's post-World War I ambition was to settle in this district. My Sydney-born mother believed she would follow him to the end of the earth. When the time came, she thought she had. She was a stranger to country life, although welcomed by friendly, capable wives. She found it impossible to understand their favourite entertainment. Picnics, sitting on a rug, spread under a tree, over seedy grass and dry cattle dung. Flies in your eyes, up your nose, down your mouth, landing on carefully prepared scones and cream cakes. People accidentally swallowing flies, children crying, men spluttering, conversations limited through tight lips, the Australian drawl.
It was quite difficult to be modern in early mid-century Canberra. The lack of housing, hardly any restaurants or entertainment. Hannah, can you tell me a bit more about what we do here at Lanyon?
Yeah, of course. We don't just look after CMAG. We also care for and interpret Lanyon Homestead, Mugga Mugga Cottage and Calthorpes House. It's a really important role that we hold in managing these properties for Canberrans, Australians and our international visitors as well.
There's nothing better than coming out to Lanyon. The views are just amazing. One thing that is very special about Lanyon is that these views are protected from future development. It's really not changed that much since the early days of Canberra, and there are still sheep on the land surrounding the property. But what has not changed much is the fly situation.
Yes, today we're talking about one of the inventions in that mid-century period that helped alleviate those flies.
Do you have any error guard? The flies are terrible out here today.
So, we ventured from Lanyon Homestead, which is in the south of the ACT, to a more central location at Calthorpes House. Calthorpes House is named after the Calthorpes family, Harry, Della and their daughters Del and Dawn. The family of four relocated to Canberra and made it their permanent home. Calthorpes House encapsulates 1920s and 30s style by presenting original decor selected by the matriarch of the family. Della continued to live there until her death in 1979, when Dawn, her younger daughter, looked into the process of handing the property to the Australian government. It became a museum in 1986. There are a few items that I wanted to show you. This is the first one, Vanessa. What do you think?
It's a bottle of Flytox. How exciting is that? So it's a glass bottle with a label still remaining and some residue in it. And this bottle contains pyrethrin, which is an early fly repellent. We've also got the Flytox sprayer, often known as a flit gun. It's a metal pump device that you had to fill yourself with the Flytox.
And so you'd be spraying that around your home and your person?
It's more for spraying around your home, like this. We also have 2 metal fly swats for manually killing flies.
Dawn agreed to have a chat with us for the podcast late last year, didn't she, Vanessa?
Yes, I was really excited to speak to her. Dawn was 102 years old. According to Google, she would have been the oldest person to ever be on a podcast.
And then sadly we had the news that she'd passed away during the Christmas period of 2025.
This is a big loss for us because she's always been such a great source of information.
And a huge supporter for Calthorpes House and Canberra in general.
Absolutely.
So what we've done here is used a voice actor to speak her words.
My mother ensured her home had the tightest fitting fly screens possible. When chops were grilled over the fuel stove, a window was opened to allow the fumes to escape. On the fly screen, the flies buzzed as densely as a swarm of bees. Anyone coming through the back screen porch was warned, don't let the flies in, this is impossible if you have a full of wood for the stove. So some did only to be met with pumps of fly tox gun or a fiercely waved swat. The swat worked, those sprayed would spin on their backs until they gained momentum and drone away.
The Calthorpe family had a special connection to the pest problem in Canberra. Doug Waterhouse left school in 1941. She recalled that at the time all the boys were heading off to war, so the girls got the jobs. She enjoyed the country life and the outdoors, and she found work at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research, or CSIR's, entomology department. One of her jobs was helping with the blowfly breeding program.
I've been associated with blowflies all my life. In the basement, there were shelf upon shelf of cages of flies reared on rotting liver, and the stench was beyond description. Twice a week I would drive the old Bedford truck fitted with a gas reducer to the abattoirs at Oaks Estate to collect a garbage bin full of rejected livers. The months I spent counting dead flies could have become deadly boring if it had not been that I was growing to admire my boss, and he was very attentive to me. He had me seconded to help him, and we had to walk from blowfly trap to blowfly trap about 3 miles, and he came with me. I wonder why.
Doug Waterhouse had come to Canberra in 1938 to work at the CSIR, now known as the Commonwealth Scientific and Industrial Research Organisation, or CSIRO. Doug was employed to conduct research into blowflies and how to prevent blowfly strike on sheep. This is where fly maggots infest living sheep, often around their bums. Blowfly strike was a significant economic problem for the sheep industry. Dawn met Doug Waterhouse and romance blossomed as they checked the blowfly traps together.
That sounds like a match made in heaven, Vanessa.
Absolutely. Doug's work was interrupted by the start of World War II. He was asked to help develop a method of protecting the Australian troops from malaria in the Pacific because they had a really severe problem, particularly in New Guinea.
I volunteered. I had to test materials which might be used for mosquito sprays and housefly sprays to stop transmission of diseases. I had a large muslin cage in a room in which I could sit, and I'd put 1,000 or so mosquitoes in and have one thing on one leg and another one on another arm and so on.
Oh, that's my literal worst nightmare.
Doug went into the field, not with a gun, but with a suitcase full of pipettes and different mosquito repellents.
The next stage was to test it out on conditions in Papua New Guinea, and there you could go out at dusk with a mosquito net, you could wave it around you and you could collect 100 or 200 mosquitoes every minute.
He found that pure dimethyl phthalate was the most effective method of protection against mosquitoes. The troops were issued the repellent that Doug developed, and it became known as Mary.
Do we know why it was called Mary?
I can only think it was because it was short for anti-malarial.
Okay. Listeners, if you can give us some insight, please let us know. But I think it's a pretty good guess, Vanessa.
At 1800, the troops would assemble for their mess parade, and they would have to appear malarially dressed, which basically means long uniform, and they would have to have their bottles of Mary with them. When ordered, they would unscrew the bottle and apply the Mary to all their exposed skin.
Humpity! Attention! Humpity, stand at ease. All right, lads. Apply Mary. Come on, O'Grady. This is not funny. Get it on you.
In 1963, the Queen visited Canberra.
We are both delighted to be back in Australia for the Jubilee celebrations of the capital city.
Government House called the CSIRO asking what they were going to do about those damned flies. Doug Waterhouse brought some of his new repellent over to demonstrate to the Queen's entourage. They decided to test these new repellents on the Queen when she attended a garden party the next day.
Really? They decided to use the Queen as a guinea pig? Why?
The story goes that because her visit was televised, they didn't want her to be seen attracting flies.
Yeah, fair enough. Not a good look.
However, when an aide was told to spray the Queen, he completely lost his nerve. He didn't want to spray it on the Queen and was worried it would ruin her outfit. And so she went to the garden party without any repellent and was beset by insects. She was apparently swatting flies all night.
Oh, that's not very nice for the Queen.
So the next day, the aide plucked up his courage and liberally sprayed the Queen before she went to play golf.
I wonder what she must have thought of it. She was probably so frustrated by the flies at this point that she was happy to give anything a go.
Yes, so the journalists were very observant. They said there were no flies on the Queen.
Something to do with the repellent spray?
So word gets out quickly that there is a new repellent that works to ward off flies. Mortine, who already manufactured different insect repellents, contacted the CSIRO to learn about the formula. As a matter of common good, the CSIRO said, "Here, have this formula for free."
You're kidding, wow. So Doug does all this research and the generosity of the scientific community is such that they give out their formula for free.
Probably wouldn't happen today. So soon afterwards, Mortine markets Aerogard. While the formula has changed over the years, it's still regarded as one of the CSIRO's most important inventions, and it's a very iconic product in Australia. After this, the Queen always carried Aerogard in her handbag whenever she visited Australia.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well done, Doug, and the CSIRO. So what happened about the fly problem in Canberra? Because it was still a very rural capital with a lot of flies.
Doug's next project was something different. He realised that our native dung beetles are only adapted to eat the dung of native animals, not cow and sheep dung. So Doug got special permission to import dung beetle eggs from South Africa. One of the CSIRO workers actually had the job of rolling dung balls for the dung beetle eggs.
Gosh, I wonder how you applied for that job.
It was a bit of a shit job, admittedly. They could only import the dung beetle eggs, not the adult dung beetles. That was a problem because it was the adults that rolled the dung balls to lay their eggs in, and these provide food for the larvae. Once they had raised sufficient dung beetles, they were released into Canberra and other parts of Australia and have made a huge difference in reducing the fly population. And I guess the fact that Canberra has become a lot more urban has also contributed to it.
Where have all the blowflies gone? Gone is all the discomfort of bush flies sticking in corners of eyes and mouths, sitting thickly in patches on our backs. The Barcoo wave, the nets over our faces, and food. Gone are the lovely local farms, gone to concrete. Apartments have no room for fowl yards. The flies' breeding grounds have been pushed a long way back from the city, where outdoor cafes flourish and waitresses rush in and open the doors. Dung beetles are dealing with breeding areas. How well I recall the early days of the dung beetle project. Having been told by my parents never to discuss anything unpleasant at the dinner table, I would sit aghast as Doug would enthusiastically regale guests with the most extraordinary statistics. How many dung pads an elephant or a cow would produce in a day.
What an interesting line of work Doug had, researching flies and dung beetles.
He was a real hoot at a dinner party, I bet.
I think you're right.
So now the residents could venture outdoors to eat. Or could they?
Intriguing.
Many people would know Gus's Café that used to be in Bundah Street in Civic. It opened in 1969 and closed in 2024.
Oh yes, very recently closed.
Yes, sadly. I remember it well from my childhood. A great place to have a banana split.
Yum.
Gus's was heritage listed in 2011, so you might be wondering why the site's closed. The heritage listing just requires conservation of the intangible social value attributed to the cafe. So sadly that means the actual cafe won't be returning. But there will be a new cafe called Gus's Place at the hotel being built at the site. So Gus Peter is really well known for fighting the bureaucracy to establish Canberra's first outdoor cafe.
Wow, so what exactly was the problem with having food outdoors?
I can remember peering over the counter of a milk bar and seeing little flies sucking at spills, nestling on ice cream cones and sharing a glass case with the cakes. It's amazing how we survived. Our family, touch wood, seemed immune to the Canberra wog.
Back in the mid-century period, Canberra was looked after by the Commonwealth Department of the Interior, and they were particularly obsessed with flies. So any business selling food could be prosecuted if they didn't have a fly screen on their door. They also couldn't serve food outdoors. Gus really wanted to challenge this and establish an outdoor eatery, as was common in Europe, but it proved pretty problematic. It was thought to be unsanitary due to the number of flies.
I understand that chairs were even removed at some point.
Yes, there were complaints that the chairs would block the public footpaths. Gus came in one day and the chairs were being taken away by the department.
Oh, wow, so they really didn't want Gus to have any outdoor eatery. I understand there was a lot of public support for Gus, though.
There really was. Gus was well known as a ratbag with radical views on most topics and was a serial letter writer to the Canberra Times. He even went so far as to write to the Queen in his fight to have an outdoor venue. He refused to serve Coca-Cola and even attached his own health warning to packets of cigarettes. I spoke to my father, David Roth, about what the coffee was really like at Gus's.
I would say it was bloody awful. Gus brewed in a great big tank, which was never changed. Gus used to come around and talk to us. Yeah, he used to come and talk about political bullshit, and he had all sorts of mottos on the wall. Yeah, he's a real character, that's for sure. Oh, it was about the only place you could drink coffee outdoors, and it was a nice atmosphere. That's why I liked it.
It seems that the coffee wasn't the important thing. Gus's was the only outdoor cafe and locals wanted it to stay. The following letter appeared in the Canberra Times in 1970.
Sir, as the authorities have taken such a sensible stand in banning outdoor eating at Mr. Peter Silker's cafe, I feel the logical step now is for them to ban the barbecue. Perhaps the health risk involved in barbecuing has not yet been realised, where food is exposed to the dust, flies and germs rampant in Canberra gardens. Mrs. Patricia Murden, Narrabundah.
Gus is obviously a very important figure in the development of Canberra's food culture. In 1978, he was made Canberran of the Year. His brass plaque reads, "He was the scourge of the establishment and a crusader of the people." One of the things that's missing from our collection is that we don't have anything relating to Gus's cafe. So if anybody out there has anything that relates to the cafe or to Gus's life, whether that's documents or objects, we'd love to hear from you.
That would be fantastic. So now we're heading back to Gus's very first venture in Canberra, which was the Thetis Court Cafe, which opened in Manuka in 1965.
Yes, because Manuka was quite a hub, wasn't it, Vanessa, in terms of that early shopping precincts?
Yes, it was, although Manuka had a slow start. Both Kingston, then known as Eastlake, and Manuka shops were developed in the early 1920s, and curiously, they were only 800 metres apart, which caused some controversy at the time. Most residents preferred going to Eastlake because it was closer to housing and had bigger shops, and it was the main shopping district in Canberra until the 1950s. However, by the early 1930s, Manuka boasted a cinema, pool and schools, and its popularity increased.
I remember mispronouncing Manuka as Manuka when I first arrived in Canberra, only 5 years ago, listeners, but I do now think of myself as a Canberran. Interesting aside, the name is a legacy of the Walter Burley Griffin plan, when there was still a potential that New Zealand may become a state of Australia. Canberra Avenue used to be called Wellington Avenue. At the end of the avenue were places named after New Zealand's native flora, Manuka or Manuka, and Tilapia. There's been some confusion about the pronunciation since 1927, and no doubt there will continue to be.
One of my teachers told me it's pronounced Manuka because when the Queen opened something there, she was handed a piece of paper where the name had actually been spelt with an A instead of a U. However, I recently read that that's actually a myth, and Manuka has been the official pronunciation in Canberra since the 1920s. Our pronunciation may even be closer to the original Maori word for the tree. Anyway, back to the story of the establishment of the Thetis Court Cafe. There were very few options for eating in Canberra in the mid-century. There wasn't a lot of international cuisine. The only option was Happy's Chinese, which opened in 1962 in Garima's Place and is still going.
Oh, good on you, Happy's Chinese.
A lot of tourists come into Canberra for holidays, particularly in the era between the 1920s and 1950s, complained that most of the restaurants had shut down or run out of food during the Christmas holiday period. They were absolutely starving.
Oh no, and there's not really anywhere else that you can go that's nearby.
No, and the public transport was pretty much non-existent. It was really only for workers to commute.
I've just ridden 20 miles looking for a milkshake.
So Canberra is becoming more cosmopolitan in the mid-century period. We mentioned before, you had many families establishing homes and businesses in the city. And Vanessa, back to Gus. He came from Austria, right?
Yes, Gus's family had run coffee houses in Vienna, and he really wanted to challenge the typical Australian milk bar tradition and establish a Viennese coffee house in Canberra with lively music, dancing and conversation until late. Quite a radical idea.
Yeah, quite progressive. Did he have any other entertainment that he put on at the cafe?
He had a variety of entertainment, including poetry reading and chess. He also briefly employed a 4-piece swing band called the Castaways. The Castaways were a group of 19-year-olds. Rock and roll only appeared in Canberra in 1956, so having a band play electric instruments at a cafe would have been unheard of at the time. Val Starr of the Castaways spoke to the ABC in 2011 about his memories of playing at Thetis Court.
Back in 1965, Gus opened up a restaurant in Thetis Court. And I had a band there, my second band, the Castaways, and he actually employed us there for a week to play in the courtyard in front of his shop, and that was new to Canberra too. So we did one gig there, and all of a sudden, the next day there was complaining to the press, talking about all that noise. We thought it was damn music.
The other tenants at Thetis Court complained that the noise and the sight of teenagers would certainly keep away any possible customers.
So poor Gus is doing his best to try and include everybody in the cafe culture and just getting knocked down at every turn.
The owner of the building actually complained that the building hadn't been designed for dancing and the dancing would cause significant damage. It's true that the stomp dance craze in the 1960s had caused some damage to dance floors, but a Canberra Times reporter went along to see the Castaways and noted about 30 well-behaved teenagers attending and only 2 dancing. He described them as 2 girls who whirled together. I'm not sure that would cause problems with the building.
No.
The journalist also spoke to one 18-year-old from Narrabundah.
I would prefer to see the evening organised and supervised, with neat casual dress made compulsory and an admission charge of perhaps 4 shillings.
Sounds like a budding public servant there, Vanessa.
I think you're right.
Does Gus take any steps to stop this cavorting, or does he say, this is exactly what I want, fun, music and dancing?
After that, the rest of the week we ended up staying in Gus's shop, playing very quietly. Ramped up, yeah, just playing shadows instrumentals.
Right, but it was noise.
So after that point, the other tenants at Thetis Court suggested that Gus host some occasional folk singing. That might be reasonable.
And presumably that carried on until the closure of Thetis Court?
Yeah, Gus took them at their word and employed folk singers from all around the world, so it would have been quite an interesting place to go. But unfortunately, the teenagers had to go elsewhere for their entertainment.
Gus sounds like a forward-thinking individual that really wanted to bring some life to the city and help people enjoy themselves. I think Canberra's changed a bit considering the city today.
Yes, we've come a long way since those days in the mid-century. Now there's a huge variety of entertainment and food choices in our modern city.
And this is where we leave our podcast for today, listeners.
Please review our podcast or come into CMAG or Historic Places.
Yes, if you like what you've heard and you've got some great ideas for further podcasts or stories that you want to hear about, more information about objects, please let us know.
We'd love to hear from you. Hannah, there's hardly any flies out here in Canberra now.
So true, but why are there so many rabbits?
Anyhow, have a good weekend.
Mid-Century with a Twist is a Canberra Museum and Gallery production, written and hosted by Vanessa Roth and Hannah Paddon, recorded on the lands of the Ngunnawal people. Our voice actors in this episode are Gerard Hogan, Claire Manning, Rebecca Richards and Ethan Wigan. We would like to thank our podcasting group at Art Sound, as well as Jill Waterhouse, Naomi McRae, Glinda Fowler and Val Starr. Our theme music is Canberra Blues by the Bitter Lemons, used with the permission of the Lanyon family. The oral history of Doug Waterhouse is from the Australian Academy of Science collection.
All around you.